Welcome to the latest episode of the Charlie 1 podcast. With me, your host, Mark Ormrod. Now, today's guest on the podcast, like many that have gone before him, is a former Royal Marine. His name is Nick Goldsmith, and after being medically discharged from the Corps a number of years ago, he founded a business called Hidden Valley Bushcraft, based out of Bristol, which teaches a lot of the skills and techniques that I think as human beings, in my opinion at least, we've lost over the years. Things like how to navigate, how to start a fire out in the wilderness, how to eat and to catch your own food. It's something that Nick is very passionate about, and he has successfully turned that passion into a business, and now he shares his knowledge and his experience with others. Now, it's been a week or two since I met up with Nick in his home in Bristol and recorded this podcast. And since we spoke, Nick has shared some very positive and uplifting news with me. I'm not going to let you know what it is. It's not in the interview. So you have to stay to the very end. I'm going to share that news with you at the end. But before that, let's get stuck into the interview. It's a long one. It's over an hour long, but it is a good one. So sit back, relax, enjoy it, and I'll let you know his good news towards the end. Nick, hello. Thank you for agreeing to be a guest on the podcast. You are, in fact, the first guest of 2020. I've been dragging my heels a little bit since going back to work, but thank you for inviting me here to your home. Thank you for agreeing to be a guest. And thank you for the conversation that we're about to have. Now, normally when I do these things, what I like to do is dig a little bit, not dig, that's the wrong word, delve a little bit into the guest's background, you know, a bit about why they joined the Corps, not the Army, the Air Force, that kind of thing. A little bit about their career, as much or as little as they want to share. But more importantly, what they do now, because what I'm trying to achieve is interviewing a group of individuals who have served, successfully transitioned, and are still, you know, striving and succeeding. But also, a lot of the people that I'm looking at interviewing are helping other people during that process. So let's just go back to the beginning, mate. Childhood, I guess. I mean, we're here in Bristol now. Are you a born and bred Bristolian? Is that the right word?
Bristolian. I'm not. I am a Sussex boy, born and bred, strong in arm, thick in head, as the rhyme goes. I was born and bred over in Sussex, East Sussex in particular, in a little village called Buxted. It was, oddly enough, or not oddly enough, very, very similar to the one I now reside in here in Pensford, in the Chew Valley in Bristol. He had a U-shaped high street with two pubs, one church, one shop. If you're not down the pub, they're talking about you down the pub. Okay. So it's the devil, you know, and you know, very rural. I think Sussex is one of our, if not the most heavily wooded county in the country. And much of my childhood was spent on what you'd now probably class as micro adventures, like any child in the 90s. You'd say goodbye to your mum, no mobile phone, you'd get on your BMX with your mates, you'd go 3 villages over to the west or wherever, you'd naturally fall off, skin your knee, deal with it and pick out all the grit, you'd have a fire, get chased off by a farmer, you'd go and stop at the local pub and fill up your water bottles or whatever you had on you from around the back, and then you'd cycle umpteen amount of miles all the way back home again, and that was your sort of daily adventure.
I remember that. And then when the street lights came on, you knew it was tea time.
That's exactly it.
Or you listened to your parents bellowing your name from the doorstep.
That's it. Or you'd be kicking a ball against the wall, playing wall ball, you know, all that kind of stuff out in the street. So I did an awful lot of that. An awful lot of it was spending time in the woods. I still remember catching my first ever fish. I must have been about 9 or 10 down at Oast Farm with a family friend of ours who took me fishing, and that sort of started a love for all things fishing for a while, course fishing, which later led into sea fishing and other bits and pieces. So between that and getting an air rifle and hunting rabbits and out on the local farms, it was always very rural. It was always hours and hours in the outdoors and non-stop adventures, falling out of trees and all that kind of good stuff, and having run-ins with a lot of the large herds of fallow deer in Sussex. So you'd be creeping about the woods and you'd sort of disturb a whole herd of them, and there'd be a stag kicking about in there, and if you're on the wrong time of the year, you could find yourself with a bit of a standoff, and you could get yourself into a lot of trouble actually. Right. So yeah, lots of adventures. Led on to whilst this was happening, I played an awful lot of rugby. Right. Went to Lewis Tertiary College to play rugby. Pretty much, I'm not going to lie. A lot of my teachers will testify that I probably had the intelligence and capacity to study the subject, just didn't want to. Just wanted to be outdoors or playing rugby. Okay. Rugby for me was my outlet. Was my every Saturday. That was me charging around on the field, loving it. I was playing at 6 or 7. At about 16, I started playing for county. Made it sort of county captain. Played there for a bit. And then around 18 or 19, I had a big fallout with the whole thing, mainly to do with, at the time, the whole public schoolboy system, kind of maybe a bit of injustice there. Not my parents not quite having the money to be able to send me to South Africa for a couple of grand on a tour and all that kind of thing. Right, it was quite difficult. So you sort of go from A team captain to B team for the last 5 minutes in the rain on the bench. So it was a bit of that, and I was a bit lost, and I was a bit like, well, do I want to carry on this journey? I still wanted to have a crack at professional rugby, and I think I played fairly well at college, but I fell short of the mark, for being picked up by an academy or anything like that. So that was a big bitter pill to swallow, and that's what caused me to go on that search for that next thing that was going to give me that camaraderie, that team spirit, that sort of hardship that I, quite frankly, really enjoyed. Went to see my second cousin, Beachy, we'll call him, for this, and I remember before I'd even got 10 feet inside of their farmhouse, his cousins on my dad's side, there was a picture in the middle of this farmhouse cottage, was a picture on the wall, 2 Chinooks and a whole bunch of guys dressed in black with MP5s and green lids. Right, so I saw this picture and was just instantly enamoured with the thing. Didn't even know what it was, but I was like, I want some of that. That looks cool.
Gucci.
That is Gucci, turbo Gucci. So I went and had a chat with this, albeit slightly mad character, and I left that room. That was it. He'd sold the core to me. I had this new mission in life, so I dropped all the meat. At this point, I was about 19 years of age. I had a 19-inch neck, and I was about 16 and a half stone. I was an absolute mutant at the time, and probably on track for my previous goal. Obviously, having fallen short, that was, I had to switch fire, drop all the meat down to about 13 stone, racing snake. Lots of endurance based phys, lots of throwing myself in ponds and lakes, and really
you made your mind up then that you wanted to join the corps, and then you were just completely flipping it.
That was completely it. Now, I'd blown a knee up the year before, and had a knee op, and that was a bit of a difficult thing. So initially the corps can't touch you until you're about 20, 21 here.
Oh, you told them?
Yeah, so I went straight to the recruitment office, and they were like, right, come back, here's what you need to work on. So went away, trained myself to within an inch of my life, as much as I possibly could for a civilian. The locals were seeing me running with rucksacks, wet at midnight. Lads were coming out, spilling out the local nightclub, and I was running past with a rucksack full of weight and piss wet through. Where I'd just come out of a pond somewhere. Okay. I was absolutely potty about my next goal. Had to achieve it at all costs. Parents weren't over the moon. Made me get a trade, which I'm now thankful for. Okay. So whilst this kind of couple of years passed and I was getting myself ready, I became a qualified bricklayer.
All right.
I only ever built about 5 houses, or worked on 5 houses, and then decided that this is, I'm still definitely on track for the corps. I was running to site, working all day, then running home again. Yeah. This is quite a kind of well-known story for a lot of lads, and it just spurred me on to work even harder at what it is I wanted to do. the time came. I got to go to Limpstone, did my PRMC. Not that it makes an ounce of difference once you start recruit training, but I came pretty much top of my PRMC. Recited all my core history. Was absolutely, core pissed. Started training, and training's training, in it. It's hard. Quite quickly got brought down.
I'm glad you said that, because I say that to everybody, and sometimes feel a little bit embarrassed.
Yeah,
because I did it when I was 17, and I found it really
hard. 17,
yeah.
You madman!
It was really hard, and it's hard to admit that sometimes, because a lot of people go, "No, it wasn't that bad," and I'm like,
no.
"What training were you doing?" Because I was hanging out every day.
Yeah.
So you found it difficult,
constantly not feeling like you're good enough, constantly struggling on different bits and pieces, and I was, there's always that thing in training that someone's a biff on. And the irony is now, the things I've really chosen to focus on more than ever, and what I would class as my strengths, are probably those things that back then I was weaker at.
That's interesting.
So one of the things was map reading. I was a map reading biff. It was amazing.
Yeah, me too.
So now
I'm still a biff, by the way.
And now I even specialise in micronav and natural navigation. So reading the landscape around us, the trees, puddles, all sorts of stuff to give you indicators of direction. Obviously the stars and all that kind of good stuff. But I just look back and I smile thinking about that time. There is never going to be the ideal situation. Everybody, even the strongest who goes on to be King's Badgeman, will struggle at something at some point in training, and it's about how you deal with that adversity when you come up against it, as to whether you stay with the troop or whether you need to go back 2 weeks, pick up a new troop, which again is another massive mental challenge for some lads. I was lucky enough to get through the whole thing in one go, but there were definitely times where I was probably having to, I think it was purely a mental thing. I think it was week 21. I'd never struggled and never failed a single rope with that bottom field test. For some reason, on the day of the race, I psyched myself out.
Right.
And I was one shift from the top, and I couldn't get there. Otherwise, forearms were gone. I was going to just fall to the bottom with all my kit on. Absolutely broken. Did the rest of the tests, the carry, the regain, never a single problem with the regain. Did all that stuff, fine. Just that one rope. Came back, did the resit that afternoon. Same thing happened. Passed everything else.
Wow.
Could run forever with someone on my back. Did everything. That was fine. Just that one rope. Got really down about it. It was obviously a Friday, so I went home that weekend. I literally took the train back, sat at home, had a chat with my old man about it. So I kind of opened up that I'd struggled with something for the first time in training. I really kind of like, oh my God. Went back again, and just with a totally new approach. And I remember listening to the Chili Peppers in the sort of section accommodation before we left. And I remember getting down to the bottom field and kind of going, by the way I tried to sing and breathe. And before you know it, boom, top of the rope, done.
Really?
Yeah, like not even nothing.
But what? Because you were
was just
distracted by the song in your head and not thinking about it?
Totally relaxed of mind.
Yeah.
You overthink things. So we're conditioned, training conditions you to constantly respond to duress and to perform. I'd say that is the defining element of any boot neck, and I mean boot neck, compared to a lot of the other services, is our ability to just switch it on and make things happen, and to what we you coined the term, to cuff. No cuff too tough. So actually, if you give us the task of dwelling on something for hours and hours and hours and hours, we just want to go. We just want to make it happen. Yeah. Stick me in it. Give me the adversity, put me in the deep end, and I'll perform, because I'm conditioned to do so. And also there must be, you could argue, nature or nurture. There is part of you is already cut from a certain cloth that can do that at birth, or I don't know. Who knows? Because we all come from different backgrounds to join the corps. And that is what I needed. I just needed to be just thrown into it. But because I'd had this kind of, bottom field test is coming up, and you talk to the other guys ahead of you in the scran queue, when you're in the galley and things like that, and they're like, oh, have you got your bottom field next week? Oh, make sure you do this and that, and you do sort yourself out. So that was the kind of sticking point. Everything else went fairly to plan. Probably no better or no worse than any other person, and I managed to finish and get my unit of choice. Get a lid on my head, and I went to 4-5.
Okay.
Straight out the door into beat up for Herrick 9.
So this was 2007,
7, 8. So started in 7, June, July 11th, I think, and then finished 22nd February 2008.
Okay, yeah.
So and then Leconfield, did some driver training. Managed to
lovely place,
mate. I didn't even drive a car. I was useless.
Yeah.
So I managed to get that all done right the way up to lorry. God knows how they passed me off on that stuff, and then straight off to unit, straight into all the beat up readiness exercises, Catterick, Otterburn, all over the place. Cuckoo, I mean, you name it, we did all the range packages, everything. Obviously the tour happened, everything you signed up for and more, you know. I'll give you a snapshot of day one of my first ever time on the ground, and I'm sure a lot of lads listening to this will be able to kind of or some of those who maybe were there will actually be able to kind of connect with this. It made it into the Globe and Laurel, so you know it wasn't a non-event.
Right.
It was second patrol day in Sangin in Fob Jackson, and I'm with 3 Troop Whiskey Company 4-5 and Point Sprog,
right?
Valen and Mini-Me, 2's up on that treat. We head out into the green zone for a brackets acclimatisation / fighting patrol. We take everyone in the kitchen sink. We get the speech about all the good stuff, you know, ammo and water when it comes to the slaughter, all the kind of big speeches, all the kind of, you know, really everyone's really pumped. Everyone goes out, wants to get stuck in, wants to do the job, wants to show the people that we can provide protection for them, wants to kind of like, you know, really let the enemy know that we're here now, put our authority on the situation, and kind of push these guys out so we can bring some stability to the DC, into the area. Here's the plan. Straight away, I think within that first day, without trying to go off on one too much, saw us fixing bayonets, saw us be ambushed at about 40-50 metres. I was actually facing the wrong way, herringbone at the time, on a knee, facing back up towards the fob. We walked smack into the killing area. They'd put it all together quite nicely, actually. I think they were Chechens from memory. They obviously came off worse. Ultimately, we killed a major Green Zone commander and opened the whole thing up on that day. I say we, the whole troop, so 3 sections. Very cleverly, they hastily placed a metal dish that they just used to eat with in the ground, covered it over. So the guy at the front, we were acting as a troop snake. Found it, went firm. Everyone snaked out across this field, alternate arcs. And to the right of us, or behind me, effectively in this field, was a small wall with a compound, with a screen of maize that had been left at full height, and the stuff we was knelt in was all nicely cut, the killing area. Right. And they were lined up behind this wall with RPKs, PKMs, AKs, AK variants. Dog came out, started barking. Still distinctly remember the PRR coming on, and one of the lads fired a mini flare at the dog just to chin it off because it was just barking. I mean, the mini flare, it's much of a muchness. Dog's pretty loud, just to get this thing gone. As soon as that mini flare went off, the first burst came over the wall, and it was so close. I thought one of the lads had ND'd. I looked around like, what the, you know, one of the lads has ND'd here. Just remember looking over at Lockie, the stripey, who was literally cigarette in mouth. He sort of spat his cigarette out, shouted contact, span round, and off we went. And that was it, and that started. And it was like so much coral dite being chucked out and weapon smoke. You couldn't see the top of the wall quite quickly, and I'm sure as hell they couldn't exactly see where we were, and probably just as well, because we were sticking out. You know, we really were in the wind. Quite quickly, the company sergeant major, the army attached sergeant major, the aptly named Mr. Fat Al, noticed the discrepancy on the map and the GPS, made a quick change to that, and called in some 105 from 6k away, which promptly landed. Once we'd had to peel under fire, just to give you an idea, even the medic had 7 mags down at this point. Wow. We peeled into a ditch behind, and this artillery came in at probably then just under or around 100 metres in front of us. It was terrifying. Okay, so some really, really big, loud, percussive air displacement, big bangs, things happening. And then we had to make a run for it into the river to do a fighting withdrawal back up to the little PB that we were naturally going to try to go to next anyway.
Okay.
At this point, a couple of our lads had been hit. My section commander had taken one through the shoulder, and another lad had basically had a round pretty much grazed down through his neck. And it was kind of a real wake-up call for a lot of us. It was like, wow, this is real, you know. We regrouped and headed back up to the fob, and we were ambushed another couple of times, left and right.
Okay.
With the final finisher being that we pushed one section out wide to try and change our shape on the ground from the troop snake into a kind of better position. Somehow they got between the two and tried to initiate a blue on blue. Now we're very lucky that didn't go down, because it was right in the failing light where your sort of monocle NVG element is kind of coming online, but your eyes are still kind of good. They hats off to them. They picked it it well. So that was kind of that, and then getting back in, I definitely felt different from then moving forwards. And every day had that flavour to it. Every day was 1 or 2 or 3 run-ins with the enemy, whether it was in the maize fields up close and personal, whether it be clearing compounds, or sometimes on the vehicle mounted patrols, because of course back then we were heading out day and night. You'd be getting stuck into all sorts. So it was very kinetic to start with. About just over 2 and a bit months in, I destroyed my knee jumping across an irrigation ditch with a 70 kilo of kit plus on. Tried to shrug it off best I could. Something was definitely not right. I could get away with it without the kit on, but as soon as I put the full weight of the kit on, it was like agony. Right. I didn't know what was going on. I was like, this is, So I had the chat. You've got to be mature about it. You're trying to hide an injury, you're just going to become a statistic. At that time and that place, I can look back at it now with the maturity that I now have, and realise it was the best thing was for me to go.
And for everyone else.
Well, and that's ultimately why you're making that decision. But at the time, on a selfish level, you do not want to leave those lads.
No, of course
whatsoever.
you don't. No.
I did not want to give up my place in that section, or I was absolutely beside myself. Sent me back to Bastion after failing like a duck walk thing.
Okay, a test.
Turned out, so I'd split some cartilage. I'd gone nearly the entire way through my posterior cruciate ligament at the back. Yeah. So 3/4 of the way through, I chomped through that, and I put a massive contusion, so a crack on the top of my shin bone. So when I put all the kit on, it was basically compressing the joint together, and then everything would get very unhappy with itself. Gotcha. So I would sort of limp around the urban patrols, take a knee, and then when it came to get up and move again, it would just be absolute baggage. So that was that, and it felt like a very non-combative, a very benign injury compared to the stuff that had been happening and was continuing to happen. So the night I got back to the UK,
that was the end of that tour for you.
That was it. So I just had 2.5 months of very high speed, and then it took a different flavour. So I got back, and straight away, if I'm deadly honest, I was having, we landed at, we got redirected to Birmingham, and I still had dust on my helmet, and I'd been in a firefight 24 hours before, and now suddenly I'm back in Birmingham, and a police escort came to collect us for our own benefit, because it wasn't a popular walk.
No, I know.
So that was interesting. We went back up to 4-5, and it was grim, and nobody wanted to be there. And there, obviously, you've got Harden Troop, which were lads who were desperately trying to rehab themselves, who'd been injured on previous tours, trying to get back out the door. And you had a mixture of those and brand new lads coming up the box, joining base company, who were chomping at the bit to get out as well. So I quite quickly got told, look, you're realistically looking at months and months of rehab here to get this back to the point where you can solder at that level again. You can pretty much kiss this tour goodbye. These lads are going to be going out the door before you. Try and impart some knowledge. That's all you can do. Gutted, absolutely beside myself, and the names just start turning up on the TV screen. And all you can do is just, volunteer again and again to carry the coffins. Little did I know that was going to have the same effect on me, pretty much as some of the sort of stuff on the ground.
So that's what you did when you came back?
I carried coffin after coffin after coffin, or attended firing party, or took part in any way I humanly possibly could. And I had this conversation recently with someone actually, and I sort of said openly, I never claimed back any of the money on JPA because I felt part of me definitely felt that it should have been me. That survivor's guilt was already really gripping me tightly. Not that anybody had noticed it, and by the time it was being noticed, I think it was probably too late. So behaviour was starting to spiral. I put in for a change of unit just as everyone had got back. I went to Cyprus, the decompression process, to be part of that team. So I never actually got decompressed myself, but I didn't even speak to the Padre. Skipped decompression, somehow fell through the net there. But I got to go to Bloodhound Camp and see my lads come back, which to me was very important. I saw them once more at medals, parade, and then pretty much went off on my new journey, which was the dangly carrot of K-Spec corporal within 2 years.
Okay.
What a load of rubbish.
Was it really?
Branch liars were at the height of their power back then, and I was sold a doozy. Well, not really. I agreed to do it as long as I got to go to pool.
Okay.
Because part of me felt like, if you've got an itch, you need to give it a scratch and go see what life is like at pool.
Did you pass the course?
I did.
I heard it's the only one that no one's ever passed.
I knew it was coming. I'd walked smack into that.
For anyone who doesn't know that's listening, K3s is a chef's course, the only one that no one's ever passed. This is just a joke.
It's outrageous.
That was your kind of condition.
So that saw me going down to Plymouth and getting loaded onto a course. Some of the lads, like myself, were sort of there of our own choosing, and others had pretty much been press ganged into it and didn't want to be there. Either way, it made no odds to me. I was at that point very lost. I was doing the course and going through the motions by day, and going Lone Ranger into Plymouth if nobody else would go with me in the evenings, and drinking hard, and just really not giving much of a monkeys about anything, especially not myself. Coupled with overtraining in the gym. It's like a lethal combination. So you get back in at 4 a.m. You then get straight on a treadmill as soon as like you 7 as soon as the gym's open, you're in, bang out 8 miles trying to purge yourself. What is that doing to your heart? And
the rest of your body.
And that would be pretty much the trend for the next until sort of diagnosis 2014, until about then, and probably a bit beyond that into the recovery centre. That was kind of the sketch.
Okay.
While I was at pool, I managed to do go out the door another sort of 5 times, 4 times in one capacity and 2 times in another. Tours of Afghan, and supporting the squadrons in all of their different capacities. So whether it's off to the jungle, I think my first ever trip to the jungle was with Mr. Jason Fox and some of his chaps, and then Norway and Oman, Belize, all kinds of places. Anyway, exotic places, very good. Feet didn't really touch the ground, wasn't really in the UK for very long at any given time, was constantly attached, because you don't really have the top cover as an attached rank, or didn't back then. I'm now learning that processes have changed and things have moved on a bit, and they are kind of highlighting the fact that support staff do get absolutely pushed pillar to post when they're down there, because you don't belong to any one squadron, so you don't have a set rotation you can actually work off of. It's just so and so squadron wants 2 guys for this. Got it. Bang, bang, bang. So you are bouncing out the door constantly. I'd met Louise at the end of the chef course ish, and had started to put my feet back down on the ground a little bit, and that really did help me. Bought the Woodland around 2012, and that was really the beginnings of what became Hidden Valley Bushcraft and all the stuff that we do now.
So let's talk about this then. We've covered your career and bits and pieces on there. I'd really like to talk about this now, what it is you do now. Because I'll sit back and I'll watch from afar.
I'm much more comfortable.
As a social media stalker.
Oh God.
Stalking everybody, seeing what everyone's doing, looking for some feel-good stories that I can talk about and do podcasts on, and this was one of them, mate. I see what you do. I'll be upfront with you from the start. This is not my world. When you talked about being a kid, going to the bike rides, the kick in the butt, I relate to all of that.
Yeah.
I relate to being a complete biff when it comes to navving with a map.
Yeah.
But what you do now, I'm not going to say too much about it. That's not my world, so I'd be really interested for you to tell us what it is you do now, how you've transitioned, and where it's going.
Okay, so I think fundamentally, bought the Woodland 2012. It became instantly, if you think about some of the nuts and bolts of my childhood, a safe place for me to be. Mm-hmm. So I was down there all the time, and I mean all the time. To describe the Woodland, it's one half a re-entrant going into, so it's like a mini hidden valley, funnily enough, into the wider Chew Valley. It needed a lot of love. It hadn't been touched or worked for about 40 years. It was, in desperate need of turning round. It was just past the point of being sort of habitat rich. It was kind of falling into disarray, really. And so I took it on. Had it in my head that I was going to do the whole thing with hand tools only.
How big was this?
Traditionally, it's only a couple of acres. It's just over 2 and a bit acres of like a little copse we'd taken on. It started off with me pretty much working myself to pieces. So it's almost another form of self-harm with the whole fizz thing. I would just work, like 8, 9, 10 hours of just graft, sweating, and then sit down with a bottle of rum around a campfire and just stare into the flames and just trying to find the answers to questions I didn't have the answers for. I didn't have the emotional tool set to deal with any of that stuff at the time.
But you had transitioned outside at this point, had you?
No. So this is kind of the intermittent bit between. So I already had the Woodland, and then after 2014, it came off the back of that last tour. The site nurse had already come out, and she said, on tour, she said, "Look, I'm not going to pull you from the tour. However, yourself and others have been flagged up. You need to promise me you're going to come and have a chat with me afterwards, and I'll let you finish this tour."
Okay.
And I was like, okay, cool. So did that, came back, she asked me about 3 questions, fell apart, diagnosed, and having spoke to somebody else was then diagnosed, and then pretty much spent the next 7 months in that Woodland. On leave, I had so much leave stacked up, it just wasn't fun, like illegal amounts of leave I needed to take, and they needed to have case conferences and try to work out just what the hell to do with me, because I was off the Richter crazy at that point. So I spent a lot of time down there soul searching, and it really, if I'm honest, saved my life, because at a point where I was completely at the bottom of the barrel, I still had something to do, somewhere to be.
Right.
Even if it was on my own, I didn't want to surround myself with anyone else. I didn't want to be, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not a big fan of, I don't function well in London, I don't function well on trains, in large public spaces, but there I can be 110% of myself and operate at full ramming speed again to a degree. I just can't do it for days on end.
Right.
So I was down there, and Louise was increasingly worried, and we went through the transitional process, which looked like this. I was lucky enough to be selected to go to what was then Hasler Company, which is now the Naval Recovery Service Centre. NRS. Naval Recovery Service
fancy
Centre.
acronym. Right.
Well, that's what it is now. And at the time, I had a fantastic Sergeant Major, Jim Morris, who now does an awful lot of work with the RMA.
He's the Transition Support Officer.
He is, Uncle Jim, so he is awesome. And I'm not sure when we first met he entirely knew what to do with me, but he got it. Something about him was just willing to help, and it was just incredible from the world I'd just come from, which was, if it's broken, get me another. Very ops driven, couldn't give a monkey's, right? If he's broke, get me another. Boom. Very cold and calculated and sharp and hard. And to be honest, look, they're a massively high achieving group, and it was an honour to work with a group at the time, but it's not geared up for the welfare thing. Of course it's not, because it's an ops driven beast. It wouldn't achieve what it achieves if it was. It would probably change the way or the dynamic down there. I don't really know. I'm sure they are working on elements, but it's a long process with that one. So I found myself in the recovery centre, day to day, waking up, having to go to the gym to report. Suddenly I'm surrounded by these amazing people. Mr. Mark Jones, 360 Rehab, Exmouth in the clinic. Okay, he was my physio. He was a Royal Navy Chief Petty Officer, He's still a good friend now, and his job was to, along with the team there of physios, try to make me function mechanically again, because I was carrying lots of niggly injuries that had just turned into just massive chronic things. Like there's no ligaments on the left hand side of my ankle at the moment, and well, they're going to be in the future, but that was kind of a thing that then caused a knee, hip, shoulder, everything was just jacked up, blocked up, and I hadn't been looking after myself or stretching or anything, because I didn't care about myself. I was just working and working and working, breaking, working, breaking.
Right.
So his task was to try and unpick me that way, and invariably they sent me to what is known down there as over the road, which is DCMH. Okay, so engaging with mental health services, which is something I would now massively advocate, and I do push people towards engaging with openly, and I did that pretty much for just under 4 years till they deemed me sort of sane enough to pretty much leave service-ish.
Right.
Albeit transitioned into the TILS service and went from there. So during my time there, I had this idea, had this conversation, and it kind of went along the lines of, look, you're going to be leaving service. You need to start thinking about what it is you want to do. I was beside myself. I was like, all I've ever wanted to do is be a bootnik. Right now, this is my identity. This is me. Well, what do you mean? I mean, you're not going to be serving anymore. Like, you've got to think about putting bread and butter on the table, and and the compensation process is a massive one. And I'm not scared to say I'm still going through it now. I don't receive a single penny of GIP or anything like that, and it causes massive pressure on us behind closed doors. Now, this is where the Royal Marines Charity comes in. Good eggs that they are. After this conversation, it kind of led to a boiling point where, and I was an angry boy back then especially, and I flashed and said, he said, well, you've got to work out what it is you want to do. And I said, I don't know, spend all day in the woods, it's gobbing off, and that's not going to make me a living, is it? And he literally said, get out my office, come back with an answer. I pretty much nearly took the door off the hinges, stormed off. Google is your friend. Making money from small woodland. I looked at everything from charcoal to firewood production but there's no sustainability in such a small woodland in any of these things. And the answer was staring me right in the face. It was going back to my roots. It was going back to practicing these time-tested practices of making whistles and crafting things and using the natural world around you and understanding it in a new way and with much more depth than I ever had before. So how was I going to do that? To become a bushcraft instructor and set up my own bushcraft company? How was any of that going to look? So I went naturally on the LCAS providers list. Now, the provider at the time, who I won't name, was the only one on there, and I wanted to see what else was out there, so I did some research.
And this was to gain you qualifications.
This was to gain you qualifications and this stuff. So you can quite imagine the response when I went back down to the office and I went, bushcraft, and the employment sergeant went, what? I went, bushcraft, Ray Mears sort of stuff. And I just got looked at like I had three heads. Can you get qualifications in that?
That's what I would think. Don't you just go out and learn that yourself? But I had no idea you could qualify in it. So
this is it. So I didn't want the one on the LCAS providers list because I had found one that, to me, absolutely, and I'm still glad of my decision today, suited... it was the best thing since sliced bread going at that time. So I had to then try to use my funding that I had accrued over how many years of service, which was X amount of £1,000 to pay for this. Okay. Of course, if it's not on the LCAS providers list, someone's got to take a punt on you. You've got to explain why, and so on and so forth. So this is where the Royal Marines Charity listened to what I was saying, took on board, because I don't think it had been done before. We had to create a bespoke pathway that hadn't been done before of education for me to be released X amount of days per month to go and do this course. To get onto the level 4 that I desperately needed, I had to pass a level 3 with this school. So I loaded onto the level 3 and 4, literally finish one, roll straight onto the other. So it was kind of that cuffing thing again, where you better pass the level 3, otherwise you're not going to... And this is taxpayers' money. Someone stumped up this charitable money to pay for me to be here. So I'm like, Christ, I've got to do this. I go along, I do the interview, I go straight into my level 3, and then I roll straight onto my level 4. The level 4 was almost a year long. 6 days of every month in the woods, learning intensively under Mr. John Ryder of Woodcraft School, who continues to be a friend, and an absolutely brilliant organisation, and very much does educational experiences, and kind of education is their I would say is their kind of leading point. So national certificates in further education. I think they also do chainsaw qualifications and other bits and pieces. Anyway, so I went on what turned out to be one of, if not the last ever, full instructor's course. And when I say that, I mean to get the same level of qualifications now, you'd probably have to do it over about 3 years, and at the same sort of money per price per course. Okay. So of the 13 people that went on the course, I think roughly 6 or 7 managed to get everything done in one go first time round. It's not a duty attend, and of course this was another wake-up call. Civvy Street isn't duty attend. Nobody walks out and says, "There's the answers. I'll be back in 10 minutes." Yeah. That does not happen, and especially not with John. And rightly so, because what he's doing there is he's putting his name against you when you go into the industry, and he's making sure and ensuring that absolute quality is there.
Right.
Now there are some people that say that his qualifications are too difficult, or are calling for it to be a level 5 because it's way above and beyond what you should. The basic requirements to get a level 4 are X, Y, and Z. It's so many guided learning hours, self-learning, and it's so many. So you've got like 500 guided learning hours, and then you've got so many hours of self evaluation and stuff you've got to do, self-study, and then you've got to write papers, and it's all got to be signed off. It's about like sort of half a degree. And John's is very in depth. Or was very in depth, because he was condensing all this stuff into this amazing course. And compared to other providers who are out there who are also delivering a level 4, you might not get all of that content, so you might not have all that knowledge, is the way I look at it. So as long as you've got the ability to retain the information, to apply what you're being taught straight away, which again, as Royal Marines in particular, I think we're pretty good at audio, visual, kinesthetic. We get shown something and you grasp it. Okay, or you don't progress on through training, and that again is how we maintain that standard. So in the same way, I really enjoyed that course, and suddenly this is when I really started to see the transition beginning. So I had gone from, as a bootneck, at one point in my career, soldering, and we're not talking about this today, at a very high level, at the sort of Premiership football of soldering. I was kind of working alongside these guys doing some of that stuff at one point, to not being able to remember my wallet, ID card and water bottle to get to the gym in the morning. I'd have to go down the corridor, back into my room, lock myself out my room, go to reception. I was going through all these processes of just being, couldn't even walk to the naffy in a straight line without taking a convoluted route, blue tack over the phone, just completely bonkers, and really struggling with everything. To suddenly being able to retain all the Latin names, chemical constituents, the relationship to us as humans from all the different plants, the historical context behind it, like everything was just going in. And so that's when I really started to feel the effects of the transition. And something that one of the other key people down there at the time, Mr. Harry Mather, amazing guy, he was acting in the sort of role of a social worker. It sounds simple, but he'd say, look, do more of what's working and less of what doesn't. Absolutely. And so to me, the proof was in the pudding. For me, I needed to be in the woods. Now, I've said this before on other bits and pieces, and I said I wouldn't try and repeat myself too much today, but for at least 80,000 years, the cleanest, best environment any of us can be in is that from whence we came. Now, use the analogy, you don't put a poorly fish in dirty water. Cleanest water anyone could be in is that environment out there, because that's what you've evolved. It's the reason you produce oils to waterproof yourself, you grow hair on your face, and not well, some ladies do,
some of us do,
and so I had to be amongst it, and so it was the right environment. So that's a good start point, isn't it? If you go into something and you're truly passionate about what you're doing, and you're willing to put in the time and the effort. I have a little thing that I sort of say to people now when I go and do talks and bits and pieces, and I think it's spot on, and it is basically that effort over time driven by passion equals results.
100%.
Effort over time on its own doesn't get there.
No.
Effort over time driven by absolute passion to do something and achieve something is what gets you there. Okay, and you're willing to put in time, Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, day, night, doesn't matter, willing to drive something and really make it work. You can do it. The world's your oyster, and you can get that and make it happen. And I think that's a really important message we need to get out there.
And I spread the same message. It's because you're passionate about it that it doesn't seem a big deal being up to 2 a.m. reading about what you're doing because you love it. But a lot of people that I speak to, military or otherwise, chase money.
Yeah.
If I do that, I'm going to earn this much money. I can go on 3 holidays a year, and then they tell you how much they hate it. And I'm like, it's because you're just doing it for money. You don't care about what you're doing. Like when you're in the Corps, if you want to join the Corps, given how hard it is, if you really, really want to, and you pass, that's the guys that pass out.
Yeah.
The other ones just go, oh, that looked good. I'd like to see that just from the pub, and they don't make it. Yeah. And it's the same in civvy jobs. People that earn £100,000 plus a year are miserable.
Hate
running around London. They finish work at 8 at night, go straight for a pint, go home, and they're back in the office at 9 the next day, 6 to 7 days a week.
Slave to the machine.
And you've got so much money, but you can never enjoy it. You're not passionate about it, but you found what you're passionate about.
And I think yeah, you've absolutely nailed it. And the knock-on effect of that is, if we could, if we can expand on this a bit more, you go into something chasing a dangly carrot. I call it a dangly carrot.
Yep.
Okay, so someone dangles that carrot, so it's a really shiny carrot, and you go, oh, that would be a quick fix, that would be a quick win. And you go and chase that, and of course you're then deriving and moving away from that thing that you truly love and you truly want to do. And quite quickly you find yourself in a position where, and I've seen this with so many people and private clients who I take away for weekends and do micro ventures and one-to-one stuff, and they might be, as you said, very affluent, doing very well on paper, but absolutely hate what they do. And they say, well, I'm doing it so my kids can have a better life. Okay, and then those kids grow up doing exactly the same thing so their kids can have a better life, and so on and so forth. And in the words of Mr. Alan Watts, it's all wretch and no vomit. It never gets there. At what point do you draw a line in the sand and definitively say, I'm going to do something that I truly want to do in life? Okay, so this is where I think, this is personally, just speaking now, one of the key things that we have in the veteran community, especially for those who are whiz-miss, the gang who are wounded, injured, sick, medically discharged, is you've reached a point where you're either in crisis point or whatever you've had a look at the bottom of the barrel and you can see what that looks like. And that's the key, is you realise there is a bottom. So if you realise there is a bottom, there's only one way back from that. Right, 100%. Okay, and you're willing to take a punt and back yourself and reach for that other branch blindly if need be, but with passion. Okay, and put that time in to get to that other branch. You're not kind of like held to that, oh yeah, but if I do that I won't earn the right money and I'm really worried about. You don't care. You're in a place where you're kind of risk taking, entrepreneurially. Your psychology is better. You are better designed to do that than the majority of other people. And I think that's actually something that we see as a weakness is actually a strength of ours. But it's about taking that positive mindset, turning that around, and growing a growth mindset. And when you start to put those goggles on and look at the world, you realise actually you're in a really good position. You're not trapped in the job that's earning you so much money, it's supporting your entire family, and you're bound to it for another 15 years until you can maybe give yourself permission to have your life back. No, you can stand up and take that and make that change right here and right now. It's quite a big thing, and
it takes guts to do it, but you've done it. You're living proof of it.
Well, we've made the start. So we set up Hidden Valley Bushcraft. I designed the logo myself. I was walking around the base asking 100 people at a time, about the composition of the logo and doing all that sort of stuff. We trademarked it. Okay, we threw in absolutely hundreds of pounds of our own money, like any person, entrepreneur starting up. The Royal Marines charity helped me to further my qualifications once I passed that initial kind of jumping through the hoops. It wasn't enough for me. I needed more knowledge.
High standards.
So I applied. Well, this is it. I applied for the ethnobotany level 4, which is purely the study of trees, plants, flowers, their chemical constituents, fungus, and relationship to us as humans. It's great. If it came here in the 70s and it grows in someone's garden like some sort of pamphorus grass, that's great. I can't really do an awful lot with it apart from weave a few bits and pieces. It's historically, I haven't done a lot with it in here in the native British Isles. If it's something that we've used timelessly as a medicine, is legitimately the chemical compounds in there are the sort of thing that we make medicine from today, synthetically reproduced. Okay, so let's use something like hawthorn. Okay, Cretaceous monogyna. Mono meaning singular, produces one berry. Gyna, female part of the plant. Okay, so inside the tree are these cardiac glyceroids. Okay, there are chemical compounds which are some of the key components in today's modern variant of angina medicine. That's where we learn. That's where we learn about that stuff and how it works. So I'm right. I think I'm right in saying that. Okay, so I could pretty much do that with most of the flora and fauna out there in the UK right now, and that's that level of knowledge I wanted to take this to, and I wanted to really be able to put myself head and shoulders above other people in the market on that quest for knowledge. And John was the place to go to learn that, to glean all that information from, coupled with live experience of being in survival situations of hardship, of, you know, quite frankly, 11 years of being a bootleg and multiple tours. So coming into the market with both qualifications, understanding the natural world, and having had experience in the natural world, you know, nothing prepares you for what marine training, Dartmoor, Norway, extreme cold, 50-degree extreme hot, carrying 70 kilos of kit, you know, just the stuff you go through and experience is so far and above and beyond. It's just extremes all the time, and that really helps as well, because you can draw on that knowledge and that experience when you're teaching clients and taking people on mini expeditions and bits and pieces.
So you mentioned about, you just said then, teaching clients, taking people on mini expeds.
Yeah.
As a whole, what kind of services do you offer? We had a chat offline when we got here about the kindergarten.
Well, so it grew quite quickly. Hidden Valley Bushcraft is the brand, is the logo, is a lot of our social media channels all started there. It enabled me to really continue to hide myself behind that brand, keep myself safe, and I didn't really want to be telling the whole world about me. So I wanted to be known for the bushcraft first, and then maybe a bit about some of my more interesting backstory.
Got it.
Will continue to come out over the next year or two, but we'll keep that there for now. The Woodland Kindergarten was born out of necessity. Once we'd established the camp and everything was up and running, we applied for changing permission of the land to educational resource status, and as part of that we wanted to start a school. So being the way we are, we put the logo together, trademarked it, started all the policies and procedures, got in touch, became Ofsted registered, went through the whole process. Fortunately enough, at the same time I was being urged to go on television to do this kind of show with Karen Brady, where the Royal Marines Charity, I believe, were approached by 24 Productions in Plymouth, saying we're looking for a service leaver who's doing something a bit different, and we'd like to follow them for a year, and my name came out of a hat. So I said no initially, because I didn't want to appear on a screen, and I was still kind of wired up that way, and very much struggling with all that stuff. I couldn't talk to a camera, and I was assigned a media minder, and the boss talked to me around.
You went out and did it.
Absolutely hoofing bloke, Mr. Cy Tucker, if he's listening.
Yeah.
And and he helped me. You know, and I met Karen. She's an amazing woman. She's not scary. You know, you watch The Apprentice, and she's quite kind of hard, and she's really, really lovely woman. And her and Louise got on really well, and Louise has been massively inspired by. We both have by Karen. Sorry to all the West Ham fans out there. Always kick off about from it, you know. So the Woodland Kindergarten was born. We passed that inspection, initial inspection with me. So Ofsted didn't want to be filmed. We had 2 ITV cameramen in. So again, that no cuff too tough thing is happening. You're thrown in the deep end more than usual. It's bad enough you've got Ofsted, you know, looking at every single element of something that they've never seen before. You've now got 2 ITV cameramen or 2 full production cameramen in the cabin. I felt like I was on my driving test all over again. Right. It was horrendous. But I got through it, we got through it, and we passed.
Sweet.
Now fast forward the clock, 3 years later, we've just had our Ofsted inspection. Okay, so this is our first proper live one.
Okay.
The last thing that the inspector said verbally was, I can't give this anything other than an outstanding.
Which is the highest.
Which is absolutely bonkers for our first one. We are over the moon. We've worked really, really hard. So my role is pretty much, I've just regraded the entire camp, as in physically took 10 inches of soil off wood chip that's been building up over the years while I've been protecting the areas of main use. I've taken that wood chip off that I've brought in painstakingly, IKEA bag or wheelbarrow at a time, and I've replaced it with new stuff. And I've used that rich soil, which is what it's turned into now, to replace other bits of the woodland. So you'll see that on the social media.
Okay.
So it's been regraded, so it's more level and all that kind of good stuff. Made umpteen improvements to the cabin, guttering and steps and all that kind of stuff. So we have a little conservation cabin, which is our sort of staff room. We are a completely off-grid. 50 weeks of the year, those children are in the outdoors. Completely. Wind, snow, rain. They're out there right now, and it's not a nice day in Bristol, and they'll have the campfire on. Nice. Okay, so we're based on all the principles of forest school. We're not necessarily Mary Montessori's version of education, and nor are we Mr. Fred Steiner. We're our own version of a modern forest school. We are completely outdoors. So I'm teaching elements of bushcraft. The forest school teachers are doing all sorts of outdoor related activities with the kids, and on a daily basis they're interacting with the wildlife in the woodland. They see the rabbits. We just spotted a stoat the other day, which was quite cool.
What's a stoat?
Stoat is in the mustelid family, so it's plantigrade, so it plants all of its feet on the ground. It's a bit like a weasel, very similar. It's got a white front, small mousy little head, and it's a sort of quite a predatory creature. And you'll see them in the woods. So the old classic, stotily different but weaselly seen.
I've not heard that.
A bit like a ferret or a mink. They sometimes get mixed up.
And you don't see them very often?
No, they're quite kind of secretive in the open. We have a lot of birds of prey here in the Chew Valley as well. We've got buzzards and things, so they're not overly going to want to stick their head above the parapet.
Right, understood.
But they'll be hunting for all sorts of bits and pieces and small rodents, etc. So it's a really positive sign to see that, as well as the deer that come through the woodland. We use camera traps to capture the images, which also helps probably keep off all the trespassers. But it's completely tucked away, private woodland, so no dog poo or anything like that. Whereas a lot of other forest schools will often use public land. But you're running the risk there of dog owners not picking up the muck and then children interacting with it. So that's another thing that kind of is that security of a private site. Swings. I've built all kinds of bits and pieces using natural features. There's a beautiful crack willow that comes out of the stream, and it's like the perfect balance beam, set of swings. It's got everything for a 3 to 5 year old to learn to climb a tree, and just as you and I did. I think it's fundamentally awesome. So
and no iPhones.
No iPhones.
No kids with iPhones.
Well, you say that they do. There's a very real need to interact with technology. So we do have a whole array of like a technology box with all sorts of bits and pieces that get brought down. One of the lads brought down something for the school the other day. It was amazing. It was a DJ box that ran on Pusser's D-cell batteries with like scratching decks and things that make loads of different noises.
Yeah.
So they were playing with that. Old keyboards that Louise has pilfered from the police station when they were getting thrown out, and of course the iPads that we use. You've got kids, right? So are you familiar with Tapestry, which is an app that preschools can use so that little Johnny's at preschool, he does something, for instance, he picks up a pen and one-handed draws something or other, okay, so mark making that would come under, and the teacher would then kind of take a photo or a video of this happening in the moment, sort of in the moment observations as it's known, and would then write, little Johnny showed great dexterity, one-handed, grasping the pen with the correct grip, and proceeded to put his initials on the piece of paper and then send that straight to your mobile phone. Okay, so you can get that footage of that moment happening right there and then a write-up of how that's showing progress.
That's pretty cool.
That is awesome, isn't it?
That is. So you're blending it.
So we're coming at this thing from many angles. So
Nice.
so we're using that kind of cross between traditional skills and things like that, and the kids are learning. They're watching me make fire every single day down there. All the teachers, they're watching. I've kind of done lots of in-house training with our two amazing teachers, and they'll happily use knives to make these beautiful feather sticks to kind of get the fire started.
Okay.
And the children are seeing all this all the time. You know, the kids are getting involved with chopping vegetables. They've got their own cooking box, so they'll make a soup, you know, or whatever it is they're doing. So we fully encourage them. You know, we're risk aware, not risk adverse, and I think that's a very important thing in this day and age, is to encourage them to explore the woodland. You know, we're there, we're monitoring. And it's all about the language. You know, if a child says, "Can I climb this tree?" rather than say yes or no, you say, "Well, do you feel comfortable climbing the tree? How high could you climb the tree? How high could you climb the tree? Climb as high as you feel comfortable." You know, height of X, and I just put my hand next to my head. That child is going to grow up forever thinking it can only climb as high as. That you're setting parameters, you're setting boundaries, aren't you?
Yeah, of course.
Which are needed, but equally can be constrictive.
Of course,
So
limited.
it's all about that language that you have with the children, that dialogue, and talking to them in a way that encourages them to grow. The term we use is support and scaffold them into growing into being kind of entrepreneurially minded little people, because the early years foundation scheme and early years education is all about getting them to think. For instance, if I did an activity with them and I said, today we're going to have a go at making whatever. Here's one I've made. Okay, I don't want you to copy this. I want you to make your own thing. Is what you need to be encouraging. Otherwise, they're going to sit down and all try to copy and make the same thing. Maybe not come up to that standard, and then so you just need to encourage them to be creative and kind of and push that. Because once they get into school, the way modern education is now, it's all going to be very maths includes science heavy, homework. Curriculum they've got to follow and stick to. So certainly for that first part, you need to really let them grow, let them become quite kind of outward thinking and forward thinking, and think outside the box, which is again another thing we're good at in the course.
Absolutely.
So the Woodland kindergarten was born. We've just had that absolutely outstanding result. The other thing that we do, the third tranche, which I'm very passionate about, is the Woodland Warrior program, and that basically is a formalised version, albeit without the bottle of rum and staring into the campfire, okay, of what I kind of went through. And I sat down and I poured hours into the process, and from a sort of EQ, emotional intelligence side of things, looked at what were the fundamental factors which transpire across almost every person leaving the armed forces, certainly, and emergency service personnel who are going through that identity crisis, that kind of dealing with PTSD, dealing with being told you've got a diagnosis, for instance. For a certain degree, we're susceptible to becoming that diagnosis, and things get worse before they get better. You know, and helping them to find that sense of tribe again. So they come to us as individuals, this is the way I describe it, and they leave as a tribe.
Sorry, this is for veterans and civilians?
Yeah, this is for veterans and emergency service personnel.
Okay.
So tri-service.
Yep.
It's its own CIC, so it sits separately in a side to Hidden Valley Bushcraft and the kindergarten kind of support each other, and they come under that Hidden Valley Bushcraft banner. But the Woodland Warrior program has its own trademarked logo, is its own entity, is its own beast. Very, very fortunately, we've had support from the Royal Marines Charity when we initially got up and rolling, and they said, look, we'll pay for a couple of places to come on this course and see how they get on. And then a bit further down the line, so I carried on doing that for about 2 years. I wasn't getting paid, I wasn't doing, just purely out of, I was working 7-day weeks to accrue the extra funding to tell myself that I was getting paid for working.
Right.
I was just doing it. I could see that it just needed to be done.
Yep.
It felt right, and so I was helping other people to just kind of work through stuff. That this year, or last part of last year, we got approached by the Endeavour Fund.
Yep.
The Endeavour Fund are obviously absolutely massive. It's a charity that Prince Harry's obviously involved with and head of. And they had heard from multiple sources. Our name kept coming up, and this Woodland Warrior program kept coming up. And I'd gone and done a talk at Facebook, at the inaugural Facebook event. I was lucky enough to be on the stage there, kind of sharing some bits of my story and doing a bit of a public speaking event. One of the crowd members there was somebody who was something to do with the Endeavour, who then approached us and said, "We want to know more about this. Are you a charity? Are you a CIC? Is this something that we can support? How does it work?" And I basically explained the premise behind encouraging people to go from being long-term sick, or what is known as, or WISMIS, into rediscovering themselves in the outdoors, getting them to hopefully to a point where they're willing to undertake adventure again, to step outside the box, to start small, micro adventures in the UK, and I offer that around the Chew Valley here, and we've got some amazing natural features we can share with people. We can take them up to the Iron Age Hill Fort, and get 25-mile views in every direction, and you can just see how close urbanisation and Bristol is off one side, and then this beautiful green landscape the other, and it really hits home quite hard how close things are being run here in the UK, and the impact on the natural environment. You can see right across the Valley. We boast a beautiful lake here, which is it's like being by the sea on a nice summer's day. It's got a Michelin star accredited pub which owns the fish and chips, so salt and malt. Amazing fish and chips. So these are all things that people get to experience. So I'll take them up to the Hill Fort. Other woodland owners have since come forward and said, "Look, we hear about what you're doing." So our local community are really starting to get behind everything we're doing now, and are saying, "Look, you can use sections of our woodland," because they know as a result people are learning how to do pruning cuts, are leaving firewood piles, are leaving no trace, are all that kind of good stuff. And so for a woodland owner, why would you not get involved? You're going to get some woodland management out of it.
Exactly. It won't cost you anything,
and it's a win-win. Yeah. So that's been happening, and then they go via the secret waterfall. You'll see that on my social media. This beautiful 15-foot sheet of falling water. They'll get fish and chips and bits and pieces on route round. Nothing better than that when you put your day sack down. Just starting to feel a bit licked after about 12k, and you're thinking,
hot, wet, and a bag of chips.
Oh my god, back in the game.
Yeah.
And then finishing up with the Ancient Stone Circle, which is the third largest and oldest in Europe, I think, or certainly in Great Britain actually, which is just down the road at Stanton Drew, which is literally half a mile from our woodland. Okay. Coming back to the wood for a bit of a debrief, wets, teas and stickies, and then going our different ways. Now the beauty of it is, it's not the field, and that's the biggest message I've got to veterans who want to come out, and because sometimes you get a bit of the well, there's nothing you can't teach me about the field. Right. For a start, it's not the field. Yes. Okay, it's white light till first light. It's Gore-Tex till index. It's comfortable. It's being happy. It's not tactically miserably living under a poncho in a bowl shape in the ground that's filling up with water, front facing enemy. It's still all the camaraderie and more. And you're going to learn a whole bunch of stuff, and to look at the outdoors in a way that you quite frankly don't get to when you're serving, because obviously everything's ops driven, everything's tack.
Right. But you can do this comfortably.
Yeah,
you can learn stuff, enjoy yourself, do it comfortably.
You can make yourself some nice raised beds from natural materials. You can learn about different ways of making laying out your fire, different materials. Learn to read the trees, so you're getting the right type of firewood. So you're having to use a third of the less effort to collect the right type of firewood that's going to see you through with more BTUs, with more heat coming out of it than you would do collecting endless amounts of softwood, waking up at 3 a.m, going with a shudder, going, "Oh God, I've got to collect some more firewood." Head torch on, out your bag. Miserable experiences, Yeah. So it's all about becoming comfortable in that natural environment, and really starting to work with nature, not against it.
Right.
Okay. So soldering is is actually quite unnatural. You're in the outdoors, you're in the elements, and you're always testing yourself, and you're always going against the elements. You're always relying on your webbing and on your kit.
Yeah.
Okay, and what I'm trying to promote and teach people is the dark art of living, very much like our commando forefathers, is living in harmony with the land, and knowing, having that depth of knowledge to know more and carry less.
Yeah.
Let's face it, we carry a lot. Spoon neck.
Well, I mean, I think just as human beings, all those skills from way back, we've forgotten them all, and you're just reteaching them to people.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because here in the UK, and I'll just share this with you, I'm conscious of time, but First World War, right? Who were the first people into the guns in France?
You tell me.
All our woodworkers, our lower classes, okay, all the privates in the regiments from all the different. So hundreds of years of knowledge wiped out, okay, thanks to the war. Young men, coppice workers, whose fathers were working in the woods. Our forestry industry took a big hit. Plus, us sending over every piece of available timber to France to prop up duck boards, for propping up all of the tunnels, for propping up all of the swathes of forest were getting cut down for the war effort. Come World War II, what little knowledge had survived that goes straight back into the guns again. Right. Okay, some of which, and again, vast swathes of forest. It literally killed our forestry industry here in the UK, murdered it, and then we relied on the empire that was to bring in lots of wood, which is why, I mean, I'm in my kitchen here and I'm looking across at this family heirloom. It's a chest, okay, and it's made of some sort of tropical hardwoods, mahogany, iroko, all that kind of stuff. We were buying in stacks of stuff from India and from elsewhere to kind of backfill the requirement for wood, for furniture, etc. And then at some point around the late 60s and 70s, the panic sets in. Actually, we should really be replanting. What kind of crop is going to get back up to speed? It's not going to take 400 years. Yeah. And the answer is pine. So now our landscape is littered with Scots pine, Dougie fir, etc. that we desperately wanted to grow in plantations to get up to diameter, so that we could have this industry. And to a degree, some of it has worked, but on the main side of things, it hasn't. Okay. And so we really did put ourselves in the doo-doo with those kind of massive events. So it changed our landscape, not just our generations of knowledge lost, it changed our landscape as well.
Understood.
And so the more you learn about who we were and where we come from, it really helps us to learn about where we're going and what needs to be done to turn that around. Yeah. So on a sort of conservation front, but also on a sort of personal journey as humans, and how we move forward with everything, looking after our planet. There we go. Sound like a right eco warrior. Check me out.
So what is, if you can discuss it, the future? The future. What are your exciting plans for the future going forward?
Without giving away too much, I'm writing a book.
Okay.
I am going to be doing a bit more talking, public speaking, and starting to try to grow into myself a bit more. Hidden Valley Bushcraft is still going to be our baby, and I'm still going to continue to drive that. But aside from that, I'm going to try to grow into being me, Nick Goldsmith, a bit more of a sort of advocate for mental health awareness and kind of promoting that positive growth mindset, giving talks on bits and pieces, and really kind of on the conservation front as well. I mean, I've sort of spent an awful lot of time going to bed reading all this really pesty material on conservation, and the Forestry Commission bulletin, and really the ins and outs of what and how and why, and just looking at our landscape here in the Chew Valley. I've already set myself the task of kind of getting the community here on board with replanting trees and what and lots of other conservation projects, but wider than that, being a sort of specialist in the UK British Isles, I've done a few bits and pieces. But last year I was lucky enough to get involved with the Endeavour Fund. I was invited to go to Africa, to Lesotho, with the Village charity, and put a lot of my skill set and some of the other veterans to good use, where we ripped out an old hospital and turned it into a skills college for young boys in particular out there who don't get an education because of the way their culture is set up. They become a shepherd boy from age 5 and not sort of entitled to an education. Teaching them, maths, English, carpentry. I was lucky enough to teach them and show them. I was astonished they don't have or have forgotten native indigenous skills. They don't know how to make fire by friction. Okay. So I had to re-show them a method of doing that. Which was amazing. I found the oldest person I could get to speak to and said, "Look, do you remember ever being shown anything like this?" No. The answer was matches. Oh, really? Everybody kept saying matches. So I was, I did this. I put myself out there. There was a blinking camera crew there. So again, no cuff too tough.
Right.
Hand picking through bits of wood and offcuts of branches and all sorts that were essentially their firewood pile. Took a punt on what I thought might work. Did the carpentry right live in front of them, made the whole set, the bow, the drill, the spindle, the hearthboard, everything. Epic. And made fire by friction, made a flame, and I used some sort of local bush which had, you could smell it, had like a volatile oil running through it of some sort to blow up that tinder bundle. So I'm waiting for that footage to come back at some point. But it was a proud moment for me because I it's sort of proof in the pudding, and it keeps you current, and it's a good test of skills. But they were buzzing to see that it doesn't have to be matches. They could see that relationship with the landscape could still be there for them if they want it. And as soon as I turned my back, I left them with the kit, and they were practicing day and night with it.
Really?
Oh, the boys, they loved it. Yeah, it was really good.
That is cool. That's really cool.
I was very lucky. But yeah, so lots of stuff moving forward. I need to try and integrate a bit more. It's very difficult for me. I spend a lot of my time in the woods. That is essentially my life. I am very much day to day. If you want to get hold of me, you're best off sending Louise an email, because I'm going to be swinging a chainsaw. I'm going to be down in the woods teaching something, or on an expedition, or I live and breathe that thing that I do. That said, if I'm now going to try and start growing into being a bit more of a sort of kind of presenter type, I'm going to have to learn to become more comfortable with getting on the train and going to places, and it's a challenge for me, and it's something I'm going to have to suck up, I guess.
Working on yourself.
Work on myself some more, personal development. I don't think that any of us at any point we can all constantly work on ourselves. We can all claim that we're the finished article, but
no,
think
a little bit every day, mate.
Yeah, that's it.
Start by getting the train from here into town if there is one,
and get more comfortable with it.
You build those journeys up, start in the slow times, then get onto the rush hour stuff,
exposure stuff.
That's what it is, mate. It's baby steps, mate, but it's important as well.
Well, yeah, and it's an easy one to overlook, and avoidance behaviour is a key thing. Just spin a quick one. Last year I had to cross a massive maize field with a client, and at this point the client is navving, so I'm now the check nav, and he says, right, we're going to make our way across here from this wood block to this wood block. That's the shortest route through this farmer's maize field. And I'm not going to lie, I just took one look at the maize in its entirety, in its height, and was really having a moment.
Based on the story you told me at the beginning.
Some of those, that sort of stuff. And he clocked it. He was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, yeah, fine. I better go first. Yeah, so I had to lead the charge. So I just got to sort of put my hands into sort of a snow shovel shape, put my head down, and just go marched across the field. Was not comfortable whatsoever, and I was sweating when I got to the other side of it. Physical reaction, but I did it, and look, no one died. It's not the Taliban, and that's the thing to tell yourself. It's not the Taliban, is it? It's a field in 2019, and it's a sunny day, and you're in the Chew Valley, and life is good.
Yes, there you
go. You've got to just keep working on these things. But if I can do it, everyone else can.
There you go. Now I know you're on Instagram. I've seen you very active on Instagram.
Yeah.
People listening to this, they want to find out a little bit more about Hidden Valley. They maybe want to go on courses, that kind of stuff. Where can they find you?
They can find me on Hidden Valley Bushcraft on Instagram. I've now started a separate page which is at Nick Goldsmith Official. Okay, so that's me starting to grow into myself a bit more. Twitter, we are HV Bushcraft, and I should think you probably wouldn't be too hard to find at Nick Goldsmith 10 or something like that on there. Facebook, we have pages for obviously Hidden Valley Bushcraft has its own page. The Woodland Warrior, for obvious reasons, currently is a secret page. So the way this works is you would send an email off to woodlandwarriorprogram.org. Okay, that's its own website, and you'd see the form, fill out the form. Right, you can do that with or without diagnosis. Okay, it's we don't judge on that side of things. Fill out the form, send off the information, and then if there's space, we'll load you onto a course. We deliberately take small numbers to deliver a high quality product. It's not about money, it's not about getting people through the door, it's about helping people and actually making a difference. So 6 people per course, alongside myself and one other that works with me down in the woods, and then so that's 72 people a year coming through on those weekends. Once you have completed that weekend, okay, and you've done that first initial bit, you're then invited onto that page, and then I start to invite you onto things like the rural work experience days, where you can learn hedge laying, you can learn dry stone walling, you can work in a Michelin star garden and have all the scram that comes out for lunch for a day and see how that works. And it's about encouraging people to get into some of these quirky rural employments. For instance, hedge laying currently, I think the council, and the council never pay very well, are paying £10 a metre, and you can lay 50 metres of hedge a day. That's 500 quid. Think about that. For all those people who are thinking, I'm going to go CP, think about this. There is a gap in the market where all the old boys are hanging up their bill hooks and don't want to work in the, and everyone else is picking up a drone controller. Okay, and the market's getting saturated. Right now, there is a gap in hedge laying. And because it's a tradition and because it's part of our heritage, the council are paying for hundreds of metres, hundreds of miles of hedgerow to be laid all over Somerset, Sussex. Every county's got its own style. Prince Charles is massively behind this, and it's better than laying barbed wire hedges because it's better for conservation, it's better for wildlife. It's an all-round win-win, and there's money in it to be had. So privately, you could probably get 12 metres to 14 metres. That's 12 to 14 pound a metre, and you can aim to lay 50 metres a day.
Well, there you go. If that sounds appealing to you,
that in itself is if you want to have your truck, your coffee, your dog, radio on, and you're happy to
decent coin
to swing the blade all day long, and it's fizz in the bag, as well. So
there you go, 2 birds, 1 stone.
Boom.
Well, mate, I'm going to get all the relevant links to your website, your social media, the program, everything, and I'll put it all in the show notes to this.
Thank you so much.
To it, all over our social media, and then hopefully, it'll drive some traffic your way. You get in, help some more people, and everyone else, or a bunch of other people, will discover the benefits of bushcraft and living out in the woods that you have. But thank you, mate, for your time. I know I've taken up enough of your time. I appreciate it. It's been very interesting for me to learn a little bit more, as I do sit on the sidelines and observe people. But yeah, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, mate, thank you.
Well, there you go. I'm sure you'll agree with me that Nick has a huge passion for nature and for living out in the wilderness, and he's done a great job of turning that passion into a profession. Now, I promised you at the beginning that I'd share some great news with you at the end of this podcast, and since speaking with Nick, he has got in contact with me and told me that Ofsted came in to inspect what it is that he does. And after what I think was a very nerve-wracking, intense time, he was pleased to let me know that Ofsted graded him an outstanding provider across all areas of his business. So Hidden Valley Bushcraft and everything it does is now rated outstanding by Ofsted, which is an incredible achievement. So Nick, if you're listening, well done for that, mate. Keep doing what it is you're doing, because as well as you enjoying it and living your dream, you're also motivating and inspire others to do the same. Guys, that's it for this week. Don't forget to leave a comment on the podcast, share it with all your oppos, let everybody know what you think, and I'll be back again in another episode very, very soon.